The world knew Tina Turner as power, as sequins and legs and a voice that could shake a room to its foundation. What the world didn't know was what was happening off stage. Behind the glamour was a woman who had no access to her own money, no control over her own career, and no visible way out of 16 years of systematic abuse. The night that changed everything didn't happen in a recording studio.
It's got to be something better out there. Woo.
It didn't happen on a stage. It happened in a limousine on the way to a show in Dallas, Texas, in July 1976. And what Tina Turner did next, with 36 cents, a mobile credit card, and nothing else, became the foundation of one of the greatest comebacks in the history of music. And a reminder to the entire world that it is never too late to reclaim your own life. This is that story. Let's begin. The Girl from Nutbush. The year is 1939. Nutbush, Tennessee is not a town so much as a collection of dirt roads, cotton fields, and sharecropper cabins sitting in the western part of the state, far from anything that could be called opportunity. Anna Mae Bullock is born into this world, with nothing to recommend her future except a voice that nobody in Nutbush has ever heard anything quite like. Her childhood is defined by absence as much as anything else. Her parents' marriage collapses early. Her mother leaves first, then her father, leaving Anna Mae and her sister largely in the care of their grandmother, Georgie Curry, a woman of fierce practicality who kept the household together through sheer force of will. The cotton fields were the backdrop of daily life. Church was the escape. Every Sunday, Anna Mae sat in the pews of the local Baptist church and felt something happen inside her when the music started that didn't happen anywhere else. She joined the choir as soon as she was old enough. Her voice, even as a child, was not the kind of voice that blended into a choir. It was the kind that made people turn their heads and wonder where it was coming from. But Nutbush had no mechanism for turning that gift into anything. There were no talent scouts, no recording studios, no pathways out through music. There was only the church, the fields, and the quiet understanding that if anything was ever going to change, it would have to happen somewhere else. In 1956, Anna Mae moved to St. Louis to live with her mother. She was 17 years old. She had her voice and almost nothing else. What she was about to walk into would give her everything and take nearly as much back. The devil's bargain. St. Louis in the late 1950s had a club scene that was genuinely alive. Blues, rhythm and blues, early rock and roll, the music was everywhere, and the talent was real. Anna Mae Bullock was a regular at those clubs, watching, absorbing, teaching herself simply by being present in rooms where serious musicians were working. One night she was watching Ike Turner and his Kings of Rhythm perform when the band leader put down the microphone during a break and left it sitting on the stand. Anna Mae picked it up. Nobody had invited her. Nobody had given her permission. She simply started singing, and the room stopped. Ike Turner heard what everyone else in that club heard, a voice of extraordinary power and natural authority coming from a teenage girl who had no business being that good. He built his act around her almost immediately. What began as a professional arrangement became romantic, and what became romantic became something far darker and far more complicated than either of them acknowledged publicly for years. Anna Mae Bullock became Tina Turner, a name Ike chose, a name he owned, a name that was as much a product he controlled as anything else in the act. The Ike and Tina Turner Revue became one of the hardest working acts in American music through the 60s and into the 70s. Proud Mary, recorded in 1971, became their signature song. Nutbush City Limits, written by Tina herself, showed a songwriter of genuine ability operating underneath the spectacle. The success was real, the music was real, and completely invisible behind all of it was a system of control and violence that had been in place almost from the beginning. The world saw a powerful woman on that stage. What it couldn't see was the price she was paying every single day to stand there. The cage. The abuse began early. Not gradually, not after years of a relationship souring, but almost from the start of their personal involvement. Ike Turner's need for control was absolute, and it expressed itself physically in ways that left marks Tina learned to cover with stage makeup before she learned almost anything else about the music industry. The financial control was total. Tina had no access to money. Every dollar the review earned passed through Ike. She could not make a purchase, could not book a flight, could not make a single decision about her own professional life without his approval. The bookings, the recordings, the costumes, the set lists, all of it was his. She was the instrument he played, and he treated her accordingly. Through the late 60s and into the 70s, Ike's addiction to cocaine accelerated, and the violence escalated with it. What had been brutal became almost routine. The band and crew knew. They witnessed it. They said nothing because they understood what saying something would cost them. Tina absorbed it because she understood, with a clarity born from years of having nothing, that she had nowhere to go and no money to get there with. What kept her functional, kept her standing upright and walking onto that stage night after night, was a Buddhist practice she had quietly adopted in the early 70s. The chanting gave her something no amount of professional success had managed to provide, a sense of herself that existed independently of Ike Turner, a private interior space he couldn't reach. She has spoken since about how that practice saved her life in the most literal sense. There was a suicide attempt during those years, a moment of absolute desperation that the public never saw and that the industry never knew about. She survived it. She kept performing, she kept chanting. And slowly, across months and years of private resolve, something inside her began to shift. The breaking point. By 1976, Tina Turner had been living inside Ike's world for 16 years. 16 years of shows, of recordings, of interviews where she smiled for cameras and said nothing about what happened when the cameras went away. 16 years of injuries concealed under foundation and false eyelashes. 16 years of watching a man consume himself with cocaine while directing the violence of that consumption at the person closest to him. The people around them had long since stopped pretending they didn't know. Band members, road crew, backup singers, everyone in that traveling world understood the reality of what was happening. Understanding it and doing something about it were entirely different things. Nobody intervened. The machine kept moving because the machine was profitable and because intervening carried consequences nobody was willing to face. What was changing in 1976 was not the external circumstances. Ike was no more violent, no more controlling, no more consumed by addiction than he had been in previous years. What was changing was something interior and invisible. The Buddhist practice that Tina had maintained quietly for years was doing something to the architecture of her thinking. She was beginning to understand, not emotionally, but with a cold and practical clarity, that leaving was survivable, that the financial ruin, the professional fallout, the industry abandonment that would certainly follow all of it was survivable. What she was currently living was not survivable in any meaningful long-term sense. The decision did not arrive in a single dramatic moment of revelation. It formed slowly, the way a fracture develops in something under sustained pressure, invisible until suddenly it isn't. By the time the band boarded a flight to Dallas in July 1976, something had already been decided. The limousine ride from the airport would simply be the moment it became real. Dallas, July 1976. The limousine was taking them from Dallas-Fort Worth Airport to the Statler Hilton Hotel when Ike started hitting her. This was not unusual. What was unusual was what happened next. Tina hit back, not defensively, not instinctively, but with the full force of 16 years of accumulated damage finding its release in a single focused act of refusal. They fought the entire length of that ride. By the time the car pulled up to the hotel, they were both bloodied. Ike went inside. Tina Turner did not. She stood in that parking lot with 36 cents in her pocket, a mobile credit card, and the clothing she was wearing. No luggage, no plan, no safety net of any kind. She walked across the street to another hotel. She gave her name at the front desk. The manager recognized her immediately and gave her a room without requiring payment. She sat in that room alone and made the decision that everything that came before this moment was over. The divorce filing came shortly after. She asked for nothing in the settlement except the right to keep her name. Her lawyers advised against it. The name had no commercial value without Ike attached to it, they said. She kept it anyway, because it was the one thing in 16 years that had felt like hers, even when it wasn't. The industry reaction was exactly what everyone had warned her it would be. Promoters who had booked the review for years stopped calling. Labels that had profited from her voice saw no future in a solo Tina Turner. She owed money she didn't have. She had no band, no management, and no bookings. What she had was her name, her voice, and the knowledge that she had walked away from something that would have eventually killed her. That was enough to start with the wilderness years and the comeback. What followed the Dallas night was not a triumphant march toward redemption. It was years of grinding, unglamorous survival. Tina Turner worked the cabaret circuit. She played smaller rooms in Las Vegas, performed in clubs in Europe where audiences who remembered the review came out of curiosity rather than genuine enthusiasm for a solo act. She borrowed money from friends to cover basic expenses. She performed on television variety shows that felt like a long way down from the stages she had shared with the Rolling Stones and Janis Joplin just years earlier.
And I'm acting confused when you're close to me.
The music industry is not a forgiving environment for women in their 40s attempting comebacks, and the industry made sure she felt that fact at every turn. Record labels passed consistently. The reasoning was always variations of the same theme. Too old, too associated with Ike, too much baggage attached to the name. A manager named Roger Davies changed everything. He saw something in Tina Turner that the entire industry had decided wasn't there. He began rebuilding her career methodically and from the ground up, starting with live performances that demonstrated what the labels kept refusing to acknowledge, that this woman could still hold a room like almost nobody else alive. Capitol Records signed her reluctantly in 1983. Nobody expected much. When What's Love Got to Do With It was handed to her, she hated it immediately. The song felt too pop, too soft, too far from the raw music she had grown up on. She recorded it anyway. It reached #1 in the United States in 1984, making her, at 44 years old, the oldest female artist to top the American charts. The Private Dancer album followed. 4 Grammy Awards in a single night in 1985. The woman nobody would sign was now the most celebrated female artist in the world. What that night made possible. Every single thing that followed traces directly back to that parking lot in Dallas. The Grammys, the stadiums, the films, the records, the biography, the biopic that introduced her story to a generation that hadn't been alive to witness it. None of it exists without the decision made in that hotel room in July 1976 by a woman with 36 cents and nowhere obvious to go. Simply the Best became one of the most covered and repurposed songs in the history of popular music.
Can be denied. It's a gold and honey trap.
We Don't Need Another Hero announced her to a global film audience through Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Her stadium tours through the late 80s and 90s proved definitively, and without any remaining room for argument, that Tina Turner needed nobody else's name to fill a room. She was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame twice, once as part of Ike and Tina Turner, and once as a solo artist. Her final world tour between 2008 and 2009 became one of the highest grossing in history. She was 69 years old. In May 2023, Tina Turner passed away at her home in Switzerland, and the response from around the world was the kind of outpouring that is reserved for people who meant something genuinely personal to millions of lives simultaneously. But the real legacy is not the chart positions, or the award count, or the attendance figures. It is something simpler and more durable than any of those things. A woman was told by every person in a position of authority over her life that she had no future without the man who was destroying her. She walked away with 36 cents and proved every single one of them wrong. That is the legacy. That is what that night made possible. And that is why the story still matters. Tina Turner walked away from everything the night she walked away from Ike. No money, no plan, no industry support, nothing but a name and a voice, and the quiet conviction that survival was possible. She didn't just survive. She became one of the greatest artists who ever lived, 36 cents. That's all it took to change everything.